There comes a moment, maybe you felt it, maybe you will, when success, money, or praise stop filling you up. You tick off the boxes you once dreamed of, but something quiet and empty sits behind the smile. You laugh, but it sounds rehearsed. You're in a room full of people and still feel alone. Strange, right? What if that emptiness is actually a signal? A small, persistent whisper calling you to something truer. That whisper is the start of self-realization. Not a slogan, not a trend, and not necessarily religion. It's the slow unpeeling of who you really are beneath all the roles you learn to play. The worker, the parent, the performer, the worrywart. It's a moment you start asking, who am I when nobody's watching? And that question changes everything. Think of self-realization like walking through a house you've lived in for decades. Only now you begin to notice the wallpaper, the cracks, the secret rooms. At first you feel curious, then uneasy, then braver. You start to remove the wallpaper of expectations and the furniture of old fears until you can stand in a room that's truly yours. This is not a single aha moment. It's 7 levels, 7 stages where you slowly, sometimes painfully, shed the false versions of yourself. Level 1 is waking up to the whisper. Maybe it's a boredom you can't shop away, a relationship that feels shallow, or a day that repeats like a bad loop. You begin to notice the pattern. You pause. You ask a question you never asked before. That pause is powerful. It's the crack where light gets in. As you move deeper, things get messier. You start to see how your mind has been running old tapes, stories about who you must be. You realize how much of your life was shaped by other people's rules. That recognition is painful but honest. It may bring guilt, anger, or grief. These are not setbacks, they are the tools. Pain becomes a teacher when you stop pretending it's a problem to fix and instead see it as a clue. One of the most surprising shifts is learning the inside-out rule. Your outer life reflects your inner world. The fights you have with others mirror fights inside you. The love you chase is often the love you've never given yourself. The freedom you want is the freedom from the small, constant voice that says you're not enough. When you begin to heal inside, things outside start to change naturally. This path asks for bravery. It asks you to face the parts of yourself you usually hide. It asks you to forgive, not because the past was okay, but because you don't want old wounds running your present. It asks you to let go of attachments that feel safe but suffocating. And yes, sometimes you will feel lost. That's part of the map shifting. Curiosity will be your compass. Ask little questions every day. What did I feel just then? Why did I react that way? What story am I telling myself? These tiny questions open doors. They lead to small victories. A calmer heart, clearer choices, fewer regrets. And with each small victory, the fog lifts a bit more. By the end of the 7 levels, you don't become a different person. You become more honest with yourself. You become less afraid of being ordinary and more interested in being real. The world hasn't changed, you have. And because of that, everything looks different. If this sounds like your journey or something you're curious about, stay with me through this series. We'll walk each level slowly with practical steps, honest stories, and questions that cut through the noise. Watch to the end of every episode. I promise you'll find one small thing you can try today that will shift the way you feel tomorrow. So take a breath. If you're ready to stop living from the outside in and start living from the inside out, hit subscribe. Open your heart a little wider and come with me, one level at a time. You might be surprised by what you find. The first level of self-realization begins quietly, almost imperceptibly. It starts when you begin to question everything you once believed to be true. The career you chased, the goals you achieved, the smiles you wear. Suddenly, none of it feels as satisfying as it used to. The conversations sound shallow. The routines feel like déjà vu. The laughter feels slightly hollow. But here's the truth. This isn't depression. This is the awakening of awareness. It's a moment your soul begins to stir, whispering, there's more than this. You start sensing that there's a difference between the person you are and the person you've been pretending to be. Beneath all your roles, the friend, the professional, the parent, the achiever, there's a deeper you waiting to be seen. That's when your mind starts to rebel. It grows restless and uneasy. You begin to ask questions no one around you seems ready to answer. Why am I here? What's the point of all this? Who am I really? The answers that once made sense no longer satisfy you. The ground beneath you feels shaky. But this confusion is sacred. It's not a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. Your old identity begins to crack. And through those cracks, truth starts to slip in. For the first time, you realize that not everything you were taught about happiness, success, or even yourself was true. You start noticing your own thoughts like an observer sitting in the back of your own mind. You catch yourself reacting, judging, overthinking. And something inside you quietly says, wait, that's not me. It's like waking up in the middle of a movie you didn't know you were acting in. Suddenly, you're both the actor and the audience. You see the patterns, the conditioning, the masks. And then it hits you. You are not your thoughts. You are not your pain. You are not your past. You are the awareness behind it all. The silent witness that has been there all along, watching, waiting. But this realization doesn't come peacefully. The ego fights back. It will whisper, don't change. Stay where it's safe. You've built your life around this version of yourself. Don't tear it down. You'll feel torn between two worlds. The familiar comfort of the old you and the magnetic pull of the truth calling you forward. And many people stop right here. They turn back because awakening feels like losing everything. And in a way it is, but only the illusions. If you stay with the discomfort, if you resist the urge to numb yourself or run away, something miraculous begins to happen. Clarity. You start to see how every thought you think shapes the world you live in. How every fear you hold silently controls your choices. How every belief you never questioned quietly wrote the story of your life. And then a quiet knowing arises. Life isn't happening to you. It's happening through you. That's the essence of the first level of self-realization. It's the awakening of awareness, the spark that ignites transformation. The moment you stop blaming the world and start turning inward. Because once you realize that the power to change your reality lives within you, everything begins to shift. This is where your real journey begins. The slow, beautiful unraveling of everything false, until only truth remains. So if you've ever felt lost, empty, or restless for something more, stay with this feeling. Don't run from it, because this is the doorway. And on the other side of that discomfort is the truest version of you waiting to be born. The second level of self-realization begins when awareness turns inward. When you stop just noticing life and start seeing yourself. It's here that you begin to recognize the ego, not as your enemy, but as the mask you've been wearing to survive. It's a strange realization. For years, maybe even decades, you believed this mask was you. The personality, the achiever, the people pleaser, the one who needed to be seen, admired, validated. But as awareness deepens, you begin to see the pattern clearly. How much of your life was built on the need for approval, the fear of rejection, the desire to control how others see you. And when that hits you, it's like a quiet earthquake inside. You start to see that so many choices, the goals you chased, the opinions you defended, the emotions you dramatized, weren't entirely yours. They were the ego's way of saying, please notice me. Please make me feel enough. It's a shocking truth. Most of what you thought was you was really just the ego's survival strategy. But now something inside you has awakened. You begin to see the ego instead of being it. You catch it in small, subtle moments, when you want to win an argument, when you feel that quiet sting of comparison, when you scroll for validation disguised as connection. You start to recognize how the ego feeds off two things, importance and suffering. It either wants to feel superior or victimized, because both keep it alive. But now, you no longer take the bait so easily. You start to pause, you breathe, you observe, and in that pause, the grip begins to loosen. This is where true power begins, in the space between reaction and awareness. You start noticing that you can choose peace instead of pride, silence instead of defense, compassion instead of judgment. And in that choice, the ego weakens just a little more. But this level isn't easy. In fact, it can feel deeply uncomfortable. Because when you shine light inward, you don't just see beauty, you also see your shadows. You see your jealousy, your insecurity, your pride, your fear. The parts of yourself you've tried to bury now rise to the surface, asking to be seen. Most people run from this stage. They go back to distractions, relationships, or work to escape the discomfort. But if you face what you've been avoiding with honesty and compassion, something beautiful begins to unfold. You realize that your shadows aren't your enemies. They're just wounded parts of you asking for understanding. You begin to see that healing doesn't come from denying your darkness. It comes from holding it, learning from it, and integrating it. Every wound becomes a window. Every weakness becomes a teacher. Every fear becomes a doorway back to love. During this stage, you'll probably experience emotional waves, moments of deep peace followed by sudden confusion or sadness. One day, you'll feel awakened and clear, and the next you'll feel lost again. That's perfectly normal. The ego doesn't vanish overnight. It fades slowly as consciousness expands. You may also start to feel disconnected from people who still live entirely through their egos, those who thrive on gossip, competition, or drama. Their conversations may start to feel hollow. Their validation may no longer feel necessary. This can create a sense of loneliness, but it's actually a sacred solitude. You're not losing people. You're losing illusions. The truth is, you're not becoming cold. You're becoming authentic. You're beginning to see through the performance of life. And now only realness feels right. The second level of self-realization teaches one of the most liberating truths. You are not the image you show to the world. You are not your reputation. You are not your success story. You are not your failures. You are not your name, your past, or your possessions. All of that is temporary, borrowed, shifting, fragile. What remains eternal is the awareness behind it all. The silent observer who watches every rise and fall, every joy and heartbreak, without judgment. That's the real you. And once you start living from that awareness, life changes in the most subtle, miraculous way. You stop needing to prove your worth. You stop chasing validation. You stop defending an image. The ego no longer leads. Your true self does. And in that surrender, life finally feels lighter, freer, more peaceful. Not because the world changed, but because you did. The third level of self-realization begins when you slowly start to let go of control. Not because you've given up, but because you finally understand that peace isn't something you chase. It's something you allow. By now, you've seen your ego face your fears and learned to witness your emotions instead of being consumed by them. But this stage takes you even deeper. This is where you begin to release the tight grip you've had on life, the endless trying, fixing, forcing, and proving. You start to notice how exhausting it's been to control everything, how people see you, how situations unfold, how the future turns out. You begin to realize that most of your stress came not from life itself, but from your resistance to how life was unfolding. And suddenly a quiet truth dawns. Real peace doesn't come from what's happening outside of you. It comes from how you respond within. So you begin to let go, slowly, gently, bravely. You stop trying to fix everyone's pain. You stop replaying the past, wishing it went differently. You stop demanding certainty from a universe that was never meant to be predictable. Instead, you start to trust, not blindly but deeply. You trust that what's meant for you will stay. You trust that what leaves has already served its purpose. You trust that every ending hides a quiet beginning waiting to bloom. And that trust changes everything. Your mind begins to soften. The constant noise of overthinking starts to fade. You no longer chase every thought as if it holds the ultimate truth. You simply watch them come and go, like clouds drifting across an open sky. You start to understand that emotions like anger, sadness, or fear aren't signs of weakness. They're messengers, gentle nudges from a soul asking you to listen. Instead of running from them, you sit with them, you breathe through them. And in doing so, you realize that pain doesn't break you. Resistance does. The more you allow life to move through you, the lighter you feel. What once felt chaotic now begins to make sense in a quiet, mysterious way. You start to sense energy differently. Some people feel peaceful to be around. Others drain you without saying a word. You begin to listen to that intuition. You notice that every word you speak, every thought you entertain, every place you give your time, either expands your energy or contracts it. So you choose differently. You start saying no without guilt. You distance yourself from noise and drama. You choose silence instead of arguments, truth instead of approval, stillness instead of chaos. Not because you become detached, but because you've become aligned. You realize that your energy is sacred. Protecting it is not selfishness, it's wisdom. And then something unexpected blossoms, forgiveness. You start to see that holding grudges has only chained you to your own pain. You begin to understand that people act from their wounds, not their wisdom. That those who hurt you are often lost in their own suffering. And so you release them not because they deserve your forgiveness, but because you deserve peace. Forgiveness becomes your liberation. You feel lighter, freer, as though 1,000 invisible burdens have been set down at once. In this level, you begin to grasp that true happiness isn't a surge of excitement. It's a quiet steadiness, a deep calm that remains, even when life doesn't go your way. You find beauty in the smallest things. The morning light on your skin, the sound of rain, a gentle breeze, the warmth of gratitude. You start living in the present, not rushing to the next thing, not waiting for someday. Every moment becomes sacred because you're awake in it. This is the essence of the third level, the art of surrender. You stop fighting life and start flowing with it. You stop chasing and start trusting. You stop clinging and start receiving. And as you do, a quiet power rises within you, not the power of control, but the power of peace. Because now you understand, what's meant for you will always find you, not when you're desperate, but when you're ready. And that realization, that unshakable calm that no chaos can disturb, that's when you begin to taste true freedom. The fourth level of self-realization begins when you awaken to the power of presence. That still, silent awareness within you that has always been there, watching, waiting, and guiding. At this stage, you no longer identify with the constant noise of your thoughts or the emotional storms that once controlled you. You begin to live from a deeper place, a space of inner stillness where everything feels clear, even when life outside seems uncertain. You realize that this presence isn't something you have to create or search for. It's who you've always been, hidden beneath years of conditioning and fear. In this stage, your relationship with yourself transforms completely. You no longer chase love or validation from others because you found something far greater, self-acceptance. You begin to see your own soul as something sacred, and you stop judging yourself for the things you once condemned. You look in the mirror and finally recognize the strength, wisdom, and light that have always been there. The inner war starts to end. You no longer need to prove your worth because you understand that you were never unworthy. Even your flaws begin to look like lessons that shaped your strength. This level also brings profound clarity about relationships. You stop trying to change people and instead, you see them for who they are, souls on their own journey, learning in their own time. You become less reactive, more patient, more compassionate. When people try to hurt you, you no longer absorb their pain. You simply see it as a reflection of their own inner suffering. And in that moment, you finally understand, peace doesn't come from others treating you gently. It comes from you staying gentle inside, no matter what happens outside. The fourth level feels deeply spiritual, even without religion. You start to feel connected to everything. Nature, energy, silence, even strangers. You sense that life is not random, but woven with meaning. Every event, every person, every challenge was placed on your path to guide you home to yourself. You begin to feel gratitude not only for the light, but for the darkness too, because now you can see how both help you awaken. At this stage, intuition becomes your compass. You no longer make decisions out of fear or urgency. You listen to that quiet voice within that always knows the truth. You trust your inner wisdom more than outside opinions. That trust builds an unshakable confidence, not the loud kind that needs to be seen, but the peaceful kind that simply is. You realize that your peace, your purpose, and your power were never outside of you. They were always within. The fourth level of self-realization is about returning to your center, the space where you are no longer lost in the past or anxious about the future. You begin to live in the now, fully present, fully aware. Life slows down, yet feels infinitely richer. You understand that everything you once searched for, happiness, love, freedom, was never something to find, but something to remember. This is where you stop seeking and start being. If you've begun to feel that calm awareness within you, that quiet strength that doesn't depend on anyone else, then you're already touching the beauty of this level. But the journey doesn't end here. It goes deeper still. Ahead lies something even more profound, a level where your consciousness expands beyond yourself and you begin to understand life in its purest truth. So before we move forward, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because the next levels will take you into the most transformative stages of awakening. Stay connected, stay aware, and let's continue this journey together, one level at a time, toward the deepest realization of who you truly are. The fifth level of self-realization begins when you start to see unity in everything, when the boundaries between you and others begin to dissolve. At this stage, your consciousness expands beyond the personal. You no longer see yourself as a separate being struggling against the world. Instead, you begin to sense the deep connection that threads through all living things. You understand that life is not happening to you or for you. It's happening through you. The air you breathe, the people you meet, the challenges you face, all of it is part of a greater flow, a divine rhythm that you now feel rather than merely think about. In this level, compassion becomes your natural state. You can no longer hold hatred, judgment, or resentment for long, because you truly see yourself and others. You recognize that every person, no matter how lost, angry, or cruel, is simply acting from their own level of awareness, just as you once did. You don't excuse people's behavior, but you understand it. You see their pain, their fear, their inner child hiding behind the armor of pride or anger. And from that understanding, forgiveness blooms effortlessly. You no longer have to try to forgive. Your heart has expanded beyond the need to blame. You also begin to see that everything in your life, every loss, every heartbreak, every disappointment, was never a punishment, but a preparation. Each moment was designed to awaken you. Gratitude replaces resistance. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start saying, "What is this teaching me?" And in that simple shift, your whole perception changes. Life is no longer a battle to survive, but a sacred classroom for your soul. You stop running from pain because you understand now. Even pain was your teacher. Love, too, takes on a new meaning. It's no longer confined to romance or family. It becomes universal, a quiet affection toward existence itself. You feel love in the sunrise, in the laughter of children, in the rustling of leaves, in silence itself. You start to see beauty everywhere, even in imperfection. You realize that love isn't something you get or give. It's something you are. You were created from it, sustained by it, and destined to return to it. At this stage, your energy settles into balance. You no longer swing between extremes of emotion. You live with a calm steadiness that feels almost unshakable. People around you can sense it. Your presence feels lighter, your words softer, your eyes more peaceful. Without effort, you begin to heal spaces simply by being there. You become a mirror reflecting calm into a restless world. The fifth level of self-realization is where the seeker disappears and the soul begins to shine. You no longer need to chase enlightenment. You embody it. You no longer look for purpose. You live it. Everything you do, every word you speak, carries deeper meaning because it flows from love, not fear. And when you reach this level, you finally understand. You were never trying to find the truth. You were slowly remembering that you are the truth. The sixth level of self-realization begins when you move beyond the mind entirely and awaken into pure consciousness, a state we no longer experience life as me and the world, but as one unified existence. At this stage, the sense of separation that once defined you, your name, your story, your identity, begins to dissolve gently. You no longer see yourself as a person living in the world. You begin to experience yourself as awareness itself, the silent, infinite presence through which life unfolds. You realize you were never truly in the world. The world has always been unfolding within your consciousness. Here, the mind becomes your servant, not your master. You no longer get lost in endless thoughts or overthinking. You still use your mind for daily life, but it no longer controls you. The voice that once created fear, doubt, and confusion grows quiet, almost transparent. Instead, you live from intuition, from a deeper intelligence that guides you effortlessly. Decisions arise naturally, peacefully, and always at the right time. Life begins to flow instead of being forced. You also begin to see that nothing in your life was random. Every joy, every pain, every ending was a step guiding you to this awakening. You no longer feel the need to fix yourself because you understand there was never anything broken. You were always whole. Your mind simply made you forget. As this illusion of separation fades, you begin to experience life as a sacred dance, energy, emotion, and consciousness moving in perfect harmony. At this stage, fear dissolves. Death, loss, and change no longer scare you, because you see that what you truly are cannot die, cannot age, cannot be destroyed. The body may change, the world may shift, but the awareness behind it all remains untouched, eternal and free. This realization brings a peace beyond words, a stillness that no chaos can shake. Your relationships transform too. You love more deeply than ever before, but without attachment. You no longer cling because you no longer seek completion in others. You already are complete. You love without needing, give without expecting, and let go without pain. You live from love, not lack, from understanding, not reaction, from presence, not memory. The sixth level of self-realization is where the inner and outer merge. You no longer chase happiness because you are happiness. You no longer seek peace because you are peace. You become like still water, calm, reflective, and untouched by the waves of life. Even when storms appear, they cannot disturb your stillness. You simply watch them rise and fade, knowing you are the ocean itself, vast, infinite, and whole. And then something miraculous happens. You awaken to the seventh level of self-realization, the final stage, where everything becomes one. Here, the seeker, the path, and the destination all disappear. You are no longer trying to awaken, because you finally understand that awakening was never something to achieve. It was what you've always been. The illusions of ego, control, and separation are gone. You exist in a state of pure being, not thinking, not striving, not comparing, simply being as life itself. Every sound, every breath, every heartbeat becomes sacred, because you experience it as part of your own existence. There is no more resistance. Life flows through you effortlessly, and you trust it completely. You no longer divide moments into good or bad, because you see that everything serves the divine order. Pain and joy, gain and loss, they all become equal waves in the same ocean. You move through life like a calm river, untouched by storms. There's no fear of the future and no attachment to the past. You live in total presence, the eternal now, where peace is not something you feel, but something you are. Love becomes infinite. It's not personal or emotional anymore. It's unconditional. You see the divine in every person, every tree, every sound, every silence. You no longer search for God outside yourself because you realize the divine was never out there. It was within you all along. You become one with existence itself, and this oneness radiates through your presence. People feel calm around you without knowing why, because your energy carries silence instead of noise, presence instead of persona. The seventh level is not about perfection. It's about union. You live in harmony with all things, not because you try to, but because you are all things. Life is no longer a problem to solve, but a mystery to live. Every sunrise feels like a rebirth, every ending like a gentle return home. You are no longer a separate being seeking enlightenment. You are enlightenment, experiencing itself through human form. And that's the beauty of this final level of self-realization. There's nothing left to chase, nothing left to fix, nothing left to fear. There is only peace. You've come home to yourself, to truth, to the eternal silence that has always been watching, waiting, and loving from within. If something within you feels awakened, even slightly, let it grow. The path of realization never ends. It only deepens. So stay connected, stay aware, and remember, the greatest journey you will ever take is not across the world, but within your own consciousness. The seventh level of self-realization is the point where everything becomes one, where the seeker, the path, and the destination all disappear. At this stage, you're no longer trying to awaken, because you've realized that awakening was never something to achieve. It was who you were from the very beginning. The illusions of ego, control, and separation are gone. You exist in a state of pure being, not thinking, not striving, not comparing, just existing as life itself. Every breath, every heartbeat, every sound becomes sacred because you now experience it as part of your own existence. In this level, there is no more resistance. Life flows through you effortlessly, and you trust it completely. You no longer label moments as good or bad, because you understand that everything has its place in the divine order. Pain and pleasure, gain and loss, success and failure, they no longer define you. You move through life like a calm river, untouched by the storms that once threw you off balance. There's no fear of the future and no attachment to the past. You live in total presence, the eternal now, where peace is not something you feel, but something you are. At this stage, love becomes infinite. It's not personal or emotional, it's unconditional. You see the divine in every person, every animal, every sound, every moment. Even silence feels alive. You no longer look for God or meaning outside of yourself, because you realize that the divine was never out there. It has always been within you, waiting to be recognized. You become one with existence, and that oneness radiates from you naturally. People who meet you feel calm without knowing why. They feel seen, accepted, and safe, because your presence no longer carries the noise of the ego. It carries stillness. The seventh level is not about perfection. It's about union. You live in harmony with all things, not because you tried it, but because you've become awareness itself. Life is no longer a problem to solve. It's a mystery to live. Every sunrise feels like a miracle. Every ending feels like a beginning. And even the smallest moments carry infinite depth. You are no longer a separate self trying to reach enlightenment. You are enlightenment, experiencing itself through human form. And that's the beauty of the seventh level of self-realization. There's nothing left to chase, nothing left to fix, nothing left to fear. There is only peace. You've come home to yourself, to the truth, to the silent space that has always been within you, eternal, limitless, and free. If you felt something awaken inside you during this journey, even a small spark of peace, clarity, or understanding, then don't stop here. The path of self-realization is not about reaching an end. It's about deepening your awareness every single day. So make sure to subscribe to the channel, because we're going to keep exploring more layers of consciousness, healing, and truth together. Stay connected, stay aware, and remember, the greatest journey you will ever take is the one that leads you back to yourself.